Okay, hey, I'm Colleen with TechCrunch TV. Here with us is Erin-Michael Gill, who's the Managing Director and Chief Intellectual Property Officer at the investment bank MDB Capital Group. Erin-Michael is going to talk to us about Yahoo and Facebook and the patent situation there. Thanks for joining us, Erin-Michael. I know that you're an expert sort of on all things patents, and we're happy to have you.
Thank you so much. Glad to help out.
Great. So you've been kind of sounding the alarm about this, the impending possibility of this Yahoo Facebook patent face-off for a while. Can you tell us just about what's at stake here?
Sure. The risk with any company that grows so big and so quickly is that occasionally, from a technology development standpoint, they potentially get out in front of themselves in terms of where they might want to be in terms of building a patent portfolio. And one thing that we noticed in our data was that Facebook, exponential, unbelievable growth, and clearly innovating on the technology side, but their patent portfolio didn't really map to what it was that they were actually developing. And we were doing some analysis on Yahoo, and it was pretty incredible, actually. The Yahoo portfolio, for rough order of magnitude, has over 1,000 patents in it that are currently granted in force today. And Facebook, has less than 100. And the amount of sort of citations, how often Facebook was citing Yahoo, was more than 2 to 1. It was like they were building on the technology that Yahoo seemed to have developed. And when you see a characteristic, you see a situation like that, the risk is that when a company is most vulnerable, like when they're about to have a public offering, that all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a significant IP risk kind of comes out of the woodwork. Right. And because IP is not the kind of thing that's front and center, it's not like you're reviewing the accounting or how the executives are compensated. But this is kind of a backwater thing. And to see it all of a sudden, I said, look, if this comes front and center, it could be an actual issue that, real effort is going to have to be, applied to deal with it.
So it sounds like timing is really the key thing here, because you've personally been sounding the alarm about this since back in November 2011. And so does the IPO filing really have a lot to do with why Yahoo is deciding to really go after this now?
I'm not privy to any of the inside information about that, but just, sort of practically, it makes sense, right? I mean, when Pandora filed their, did their public offering, Augme Technologies came out, and, they had a patent issue they had to deal with at that moment. And I think in that situation, their investment banker, I think it was Morgan Stanley, actually had to, pay to some extent to kind of resolve some of those issues.
Because these companies are sort of up against the wall because they want to go out for the IPO, they want to go public, and so, there's a little bit more incentive for them to pay and get this out of the way rather than to fight it.
Right. You don't want to. The last thing you want to do is bring up a whole host of questions for investors that, realistically for the day-to-day operations of a company, might not matter, right? And so if you're saying, look, this is a problem that could go away by, a cross-licensing agreement or, a settlement or something like that, at that time, the calculus could be very, very different than after an IPO when you're well capitalized and say, we're going to fight this to the end of time. You don't want to be introducing new, potentially material questions to your investor community.
So now in a case, sorry.
No, you're right, that's right.
So in a case like this, from what we know, nothing has been filed yet. It's just sort of preliminary talks. And what the New York Times is the first who reported on this, and they said it looks like 10 to 20 patents out of the thousands that Yahoo has. Yahoo has decided to say there's 10 to 20 that Facebook definitely is infringing upon. How much could that cost for Facebook to make that go away?
So people have been throwing out, some numbers. I think, one analyst was saying that it could be, Yahoo shouldn't take any less than $3 billion to for this IP. And realistically, until you really know sort of what the IP is and you do that full analysis, it's hard to give you sort of a number that I can sort of stand behind. But what I can say though is that when you have a portfolio of patents and they're substantial and they're directly on what someone's doing and it's core to the essence of what the company is, it's very, very different from the dynamic of, okay, I might have one or two patents that I can, perhaps maybe they're of suspect validity. I can find some prior art. Somebody was doing the exact same thing in the 1980s, file something at the US Patent Office and get it invalidated. And maybe they spend a few $1,000,000 fighting it in court, or tens of millions of dollars fighting it in court. But you have perhaps a reasonable expectation of success when you do that analysis. When the numbers start getting bigger and bigger, you're saying, well, I have a portfolio of 10, 20, who knows, they do another, screen and they come up with 30, 50 patents. What they're saying is, we want to enter into a substantial licensing arrangement. And, frankly, it's smart to try to open up these negotiations now. I mean, if you're, once you're a publicly traded company, once you're a large entity, this is just sort of a matter of course. It's like having any other function that you would expect to be excellent inside of the company. And this is going to put additional renewed focus at Facebook on IP.
Right. And so do you think there's anyone else who could come out of the woodwork here? I mean, you've been calling Yahoo for a while. Have you noticed any other companies with whom Facebook really overlaps when it comes to patents?
If you give me just a second, I haven't. So the analysis on Yahoo was really pretty dramatic. So MDB Capital, what makes us unusual is we built this big this patent database. We bought all the patent data, over 7 million patent documents. We hired a staff of folks to go through everyone by hand, reconciling inventor information, assignment, subsidiary information, all of this work, mapping citations, and we come up with all these analytics. But part of the analytics is understanding sort of who is citing whom, at what rate. It looks like Amazon is cited at a ratio of over 5.5 to 1.
Wow.
And IBM a little over 3 to 1. So, but the dynamics there could be potentially very different. You have to look at a lot of different factors. But at least on that one small metric, in terms of, you look at citations just to understand who's sort of building in the same technology space. It's not that they're looking at the patents and necessarily saying, oh, I got to, build on top of that. But they have a similar technology focus. To some extent, that can provide an interesting data point to go down and do some perhaps further analysis.
Right. And so do we have any sort of indication, and I know you don't have any inside information on this arrangement particularly, but do you have any insight onto whether or not it looks like Facebook is the kind of company who's going to fight this just to set a precedent to show that other companies can't, shake them down for money, or do you think that that a settlement in this case might make sense just to kind of establish a cross-licensing agreement, and get it out of the way?
I would, so I would expect them to do a lot like Google did. I mean, frankly, Google, when Yahoo did this same thing to Google when Google went public, right? I mean, Google went public and there was an urgent cross-license they had to take with Yahoo. And then Google started, when they got into mobile, and they got so big in mobile so quickly that all of a sudden all these other players that had all these cross-license and everything else saw this player, which essentially did not have a sophisticated patent portfolio. And then, Google's had to spend, enormous resources in both, internally developing IP and also being very aggressive on the acquisition front. And when you're a well-capitalized company in the public markets, you can do that. And so from Facebook's perspective, it would just sort of reasonably make sense to come to some sort of agreement and settlement with Facebook. With the larger players, it would make sense that you start acquiring portfolios that are relevant to someone like Amazon. And so that you have the assets that you can enter into rational cross-license agreements. And then for the individuals where it's some guy with a suspect patent that allegedly invented the internet, well, then you build the internal capability to fight those kind of as and when they come in. Yeah.
And I know you're out in Washington, D.C., and you're very, involved with the patent office and everything, but you must be aware that out here in Silicon Valley, there's a lot of people that say that the entire patent system just needs to, be thrown out, or, you've never heard that?
Oh my God, it's unbelievable.
But yeah, so I just wanted to kind of see, and so in a lot of ways in the PR situation, Yahoo is coming across not looking so great, to a certain, environment here. And it sounds like you see this as a pretty rational thing that they're doing, and it's a pretty smart thing and almost an inevitable thing that they did. But, how do you kind of see this as fitting into the larger landscape of, and how likely is it that this could kind of push forward the move to do an overhaul of our patent system?
Well, I mean, being a person that, what our firm does is we take companies that might have little more than a patent and a prototype, and based on their IP and the ability for that IP to provide something of an insurance policy to both the investors and the inventors, we capitalize and in some ways overcapitalize companies that have these proprietary positions. And we're helping to bring technology to market is what, is a non-trivial part of what the patent system was intended to do. Now, I absolutely understand that if there's an inefficiency in the system itself, right, a patent gets granted that's ridiculous, that should never have gotten granted in the first place. That's fair enough. There's systems that exist in patent reform that was recently, the past, but there's systems that exist to help invalidate those issues. It's far from perfect. But in terms of the nature of the system itself, even things like software patents, it protects real innovation. And so long as these patents can be granted in a timely fashion, then you're looking at something that allows inventors to be rewarded for what they do. I understand, just keep building faster and faster and faster. And that's great if you're not the guy building. But if you've invented something that's substantial and important, there should be more guys like me that can recognize, hey, A versus A prime, A is better because they've done the work and, they've got a better patent portfolio and they've done something that's going to matter, going out 15, 20 years. Those guys deserve to be rewarded. It's just, and I understand the perspective on the other side. Information deserves to be free. Patents get in the way of real developers, and I definitely understand that, and it's a non-trivial problem. But the solution can't be that when you do develop something really important, that you just hope that you're able to raise capital and hope that larger companies don't end up taking your technology. At the end of the day, Facebook's going to end up being 10 times the size of Yahoo. And you're right, and you look at it and say, all right, well, if Facebook has to pay a drop in the bucket for the fact that Yahoo developed some pretty innovative stuff 10 years ago, it is what it is.
Great. Well, thank you so much for talking to us. And it's interesting to think of potentially $3 billion as a drop in the bucket, but that's the league that we're playing in here.
I'm not sure. Wait, that's not me. I'm saying other people have said that. That's
right.
I'm not gonna.
No, I know, but in the scheme of things, you're right. It's it seems like a decent price, I suppose. But great. Well, thank you so much, Erin-Michael. I really appreciate you taking the time.
You're welcome. Good luck, and glad to help.
Great.